Soldier Mage King, Chapter 28, To Kill the King. Merlin held Gwen as she sobbed into her shoulder. The past few days had been madness. Gwen's father had been arrested for conspiring with a sorcerer. He hadn't known Tauren had been a sorcerer, nor an enemy of Camelot. All of this had been so hard on Gwen. Her father had attempted escape and been slain in the attempt. Lady Morgana was nowhere to be found, so Merlin had pulled the distraught Gwen into her room. There wasn't much she could do to help. Gwen's father was already dead. She couldn't have saved him. Arthur had been kind about the whole thing, ensuring Gwen took no blame and kept her house and her job, both for life. Merlin was quite proud of him for that, but she couldn't forgive what had been done to Gwen. She had lost the only family she had, and would not be allowed to properly put him to rest because he'd been arrested for suspected involvement with sorcery. Eventually, Gwen fell asleep, and Merlin frowned as she tucked her into her bed. Merlin closed the door behind her. Gaius frowned at her.
"How is Gwen doing?"
he asked. "As well as can be expected," Merlin said, and Gaius frowned but nodded. He held up a note, a name written on the cover. It read, Elian. "Who's Elian?" Merlin asked.
"Gwen's older brother,"
Gaius said, and Merlin's eyebrows climbed.
"He left a few years before you came to Camelot, seeking better prospects. But Gwen asked me to inform him of what's happening. I need you to take this down to the Rising Sun and see that the messenger from Caerleon gets it,"
he said, handing her a few coins. "That's where he was last seen?" Merlin asked, grabbing her cloak from the peg by the door. Gaius nodded.
"Yes, hurry along now. I'll keep an eye on Gwen,"
Gaius assured, and Merlin nodded, pulling her hood up against the downpour raging outside. Once assured his father was all right, Arthur sought out Morgana. She had been present at the attempted assassination. When he found her, she was shaking slightly.
"Are you all right?"
he asked. She nodded.
"That was far too close,"
she said, rubbing her wrists, which were still bruised from her short stint in the dungeons. Arthur nodded.
"It was. I'm sorry you had to go through that,"
he said, and Morgana nodded, avoiding his eyes.
"I suppose that's just one of the many dangers when traveling with your father,"
she said, and Arthur frowned.
"It can be. The guards found 2 of Tauren's men further into the valley. They were both dead as well, but they could find no sign of how. Was there anyone else? Did you see anyone?"
Arthur asked, trying to be gentle about it. Morgana shook her head. There was a knock at the door. It opened, revealing Gwen. Her eyes were slightly red, and she was holding a bunch of flowers. Morgana smiled at her and opened her arms. Gwen ran to her and hugged her.
"I heard what happened. I'm so glad you're all right, my lady."
Gwen cried into her shoulder. Arthur left the two alone. In the hall, he met Merlin, who was frowning.
"You can go in there too, you know,"
Arthur offered. Well, he knew Merlin was his servant. He knew the 3 girls were thick as thieves. Surprisingly, Merlin shook her head. "No. Gwen needs Morgana. Not me right now."
"Is your father all right? I heard what happened,"
Merlin said, and Arthur allowed himself a small smile.
"He'll be fine. He's fine. Glad to be rid of Tauren. And the vaults have another artifact to sit and gather dust,"
Arthur said, and Merlin rolled her eyes. Arthur frowned, just now noticing the dark circles under Merlin's eyes.
"Are you all right?"
"Haven't slept well these past few nights," Merlin admitted. Arthur nodded.
"Take the night off. Gwen needs you more than I do right now,"
Arthur offered, and Merlin grinned at him, nodding.
"But remember, we've a hunt to go on day after tomorrow,"
he called. "You're dragging me on another one of those," Merlin grouched.
"It'll be several days long, and it's always good to have someone with a rudimentary knowledge of medicine along,"
Arthur said. Merlin's smile turned impish. "You're getting dangerously close to compliments. Arthur, you're sure you're feeling well?" she teased.
"I could still give you a mountain of chores for tonight,"
he threatened, and she shook her head. "You've already given me the night off. Can't take it back now," she said, scurrying off down the stairs. She missed his fond smile as she rounded the corner.